It's been a weird couple of years for sports anime and manga. It's also been a weird couple of years for delinquent anime and manga. See, over the course of the last couple of years, we've seen things like the ending of Haikyuu's manga, and now it's anime. We got things like the first Slam Dunk movie, and Kuroko no Basket has been over for years. In the delinquent space, Tokyo Revengers became quite possibly one of the most popular delinquent animes of all time, only to crash and burn. But in both the delinquency space and the sports spaces, we've seen a resurgence over the last couple of years. As in the delinquency space, we got one of the biggest surprises in anime in the last decade, Windbreakers, which swept up critical acclaim all across the globe as it filled the Tokyo Revengers size hole in our heart, and just as Haikyuu was coming to its end, it was replaced by Blue Lock. And while Blue Lock's quality substantially fell off in its second season, it is still one of the most popular anime and manga in existence today, even after its abysmal second season. Tie this into other, arguably better soccer anime that came out recently, like Aoishi, and it seems as though in the world of sports anime, soccer is the dominating topic. And with the resurgence of good delinquent anime in Windbreaker, it seems as though it's a great time to write a story about delinquents. So what happens when you combine both those things? Well, you get a brand new sports manga that's taking the world by storm, because if you combine those two things, you get Embers. But Nick, you ask, what is Embers? Well, it's a soccer manga, and while it only currently has 2 chapters out right now, it's one of the most read mangas in circulation currently. But why? Why is it doing so incredibly well? Well, 1, because it's really good, and 2, because the person responsible for the art of Embers, Satoru Nishi, was actually an assistant for the Blue Lock manga. And therefore, the Blue Lock mangaka, Monoyuki Kaneshiro, told everybody, hey, go read my assistant's manga. And so they did. But is Embers worth the hype that it's currently getting? What's the story about? How's the art? How's the writing? And do I think that Embers has the possible potential to surpass all other soccer anime? Well, today we're gonna answer all those questions and more, because today we're talking the next biggest sports anime explained. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Hold up, you're gonna spend a minute with me real quick, because I wanna talk to you about the sponsor of today's video, Factor. Factor wants to help you take the stress and inconvenience out of mealtime, ensuring that you're still crushing your nutrition goals with enough time left in your day to do the things that you enjoy. See, unfortunately, when it comes down to it, me, Steven, Chris, and Danny don't have all the time in the world. We especially don't have enough time to goof around with each other and make videos like this if we have to spend all day cooking, prepping, and cleaning just to make a little bit of food. And that's where Factor comes into play. See, Factor keeps us going because the 4 of us know that we have nutritional, dietitian approved, healthy, and easy to make meals at home waiting for us whenever we need them. We get meals delivered to us by Factor every single week, and we know those meals just take 2 minutes in the microwave to prep. But Factor's got us covered with more than just lunch every single week. They also cover us with breakfast, smoothies, snacks, juices, and so much more, which takes the stress out of every kind of grocery shopping. On top of that, with Factor, we know that we're making a sustainable choice, as Factor offsets 100% of their delivery emissions and sources 100% renewable energy for the production and offices. But when it comes to food, there's a big difference between showing and telling. So let's head down to the kitchen and try some Factor meals.
Today I want to take the time to illustrate to you that HelloFresh can truly cater to any dietary restrictions by eating our 3-bean vegan chili.
Prepping this meal is the same as prepping any Factor meal. We take this slide off here, poke a couple of holes in the plastic, throw it in the microwave for 2 whole minutes. Take it out, apply our sauce here for flavor.
And that is delicious. And more important than anything, easy, and also dietitian approved.
So what are you guys waiting for? Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50TWC to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50TWC at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. If you started microwaving a Factor meal at the beginning of this ad, it'd be done by now, and you'd have something to eat while you watch us. So, what is Embers? Is it a worthwhile read? What makes it good? What are its strong points? And what are its weak points? Well, before we get into all those semi-complicated questions, let's start this video off in the way that we tend to start these kinds of videos off, by answering the easy question. So, What is Embers? Embers is a pretty straightforward sports story. Imagine if Bakugo decided to be a defensive back in a soccer team. That's pretty much the best and easiest way to describe Embers. See, the beginning of chapter 1 introduces our main character, Haitani, who's apparently one of the greatest middle school brawlers of all time. And Haitani is in the 9th grade, which means that he's 15 years old. Does he look 15? No, he looks 25. And so does kind of everybody else in this story. But like I said earlier, Haitani is the greatest middle school brawler in all of Japan, at least in local Japan. And thus basically everybody who's new to the school or thinks they're tough challenges Haitani to a fight, all of which Haitani seemingly wins with ease. However, as Haitani is the leader of the delinquents of his school and is always getting in fights, he isn't exactly beloved by his teachers. And in this regard, he's actually more closely relatable to Yusuke from Yu Yu Hakusho than Bakugo, an incredible middle school brawler that all of his teachers hate. And in a very, and I mean very, similar vein to Yusuke, while the majority of the teachers of his middle school are thinking about ways to get him either suspended or expelled, there's one teacher by the name of Oshimi who takes a chance with Haitani. See, Oshimi just transferred to Haitani's middle school, and therefore he hasn't given up on Haitani like the other teachers. And thus he gets an idea while Haitani is beating down on somebody who challenged him to a fight, to challenge Haitani to a contest, a one-on-one contest. And if Oshimi is successful in this contest, Haitani can no longer engage in school brawls. Now, Haitani, believing that this challenge was going to be a fist fight between him and a 60-year-old man, takes it. But in actuality, Oshimi pulls out a soccer ball and challenges Haitani to take it from him. And for 2 hours, he tries exactly that. However, Oshimi is apparently an incredibly good soccer player, and he manages to keep the ball away from Haitani for the entirety of those 2 hours until eventually Haitani is so exhausted that he falls down. And thus, over the course of the next couple of weeks, Oshimi keeps giving Haitani some kind of soccer homework, saying things like, once you can juggle a ball 10 times, you can challenge me again. However, every single time Haitani challenges Oshimi, he loses. And thus a dichotomy begins to occur, where every single time Haitani has tried to do anything as it relates to soccer, he's lost, when previous to this moment, he was known for his sterling record in street brawls. And thus with time, not only does Haitani begin to vent his emotions into playing soccer as opposed to fighting, but he also begins to bring the other members of his delinquent squad to come play soccer with him. And while these moments could be written off with a couple of funny lines as these delinquents do things like break bottles or bring baseball bats to try and get this soccer ball from a 60-year-old man, I think it's actually these couple of moments that show the true strengths of what Embers may become. See, because the narrative being built around Oshimi and Haitani essentially training to make Haitani an incredible defensive back in soccer is actually less about Haitani improving at his soccer skills and more about Haitani improving as a person. See, there's a moment towards the end of the Oshimi-Haitani soccer training montage where the other teachers come up to Oshimi and tell him that he's wasting his time on Haitani, that he's a lost cause, that Haitani is a violent thug who doesn't deserve his time. And unfortunately, Haitani is privy to this entire conversation. However, in response to these teachers saying these horrible things about a child, Oshimi screams at these teachers and says, children are ripening fruits, and it's our jobs as adults and teachers to make sure that they turn into ripe fruits, not rotten ones. And thus, while this could be a pretty surface level story about a delinquent using their delinquent abilities to be super strong and scary on the soccer field, I found myself borderline tearing up while reading the first chapter, as it quickly became a story about a mentor doing what they can to redirect a lost child. Because that's what Haitani is. He's 15 years old. He's a child. And when Haitani hears Oshimi taking up for him, it feels as though it's the first time he's ever experienced somebody having his back. And thus Haitani gathers together 11 of his delinquents. And kind of like in the beginning of Owashi, this middle school team of delinquents go and compete in a regional match. A regional match where our classic sports rival is introduced in Takami, a genius substantially smaller than Haitani's striker. And while Haitani's team of delinquents end up losing the match 8-0 like they're Brazil, Haitani is able to keep Takami to just one goal, which is wildly impressive because everybody in the crowd believes that Takami could be the greatest middle school striker in all of Japan. But in this match, while Haitani and his teammates are greatly outclassed, there's a couple of really cool moments that depict Oshimi's positive influence in their lives. Like all of these now former delinquents playing to the whistle even though they're down 7 or 8 goals. Them fighting for each other instead of against each other. And them dedicating their time and their effort to something that's not violence. And listen, with me saying all this, I don't want you to think that this is an overly serious manga. It's not. It delivers humor in a very classical mix between a sports anime and a delinquent anime. And therefore, while it doesn't take itself as seriously as Blue Lock does, it's also not as chummy and lovey-dovey lovey as Haikyuu. Quite honestly, tonality-wise, the best comparison I can make is actually Windbreaker, which is also a story about a delinquent accidentally dedicating their energy to something other than punching people in the face. Though, it's just dedicating their energy to punching other people in the face for good in Windbreaker. And thus, even though this match ends 8-0, it sparks a fire in all of the hearts of the teammates of Haitani to pursue soccer. But most specifically Haitani, who eventually graduates from middle school and goes to high school. A high school that apparently he usually wouldn't have been able to get into if he hadn't turned his life around in the last couple of months. And a high school, like with Haikyuu, was at one point known for its prestigious soccer program. However, also, like with Haikyuu, this team's been missing two integral parts: a defender who can steal balls and a striker who can steal goals. And you wouldn't believe it, both Takumi and Haitani end up at this high school. And thus the rivalry begins, as the polished jewel of a striker has to figure out how to work with a new team, and the diamond in the rough defender has to figure out the basics. It's very, and I mean very, Haikyuu. Haitani is Hinata, except take away the quick attack and the jumping ability and replace it with just the preternatural ability to be a wall on the soccer field, and also a tall and muscular stature that's been forged in the fires of street fights, and replace Kageyama's robot-like ability to put a set in a perfect position for anybody regardless of where they are, with a Rinitoshi level soccer intellect and the ability to score from really anywhere on the pitch. And you have the two cornerstones of this anime heading forward. On top of this, in chapter 2, the captain of the soccer team is introduced, Captain Bugai, who is a midfielder and presumably a senior, though it's never talked about, and he's depicted as being the strong, stoic, and sensitive type. Kind of like Daiichi and Haikyuu, but more like Toma and Windbreaker than anything. And fundamentally, those are the connections that I keep coming back to. Embers is if like Haikyuu met Windbreaker and then made it a story about soccer. And while that sounds like a real complicated mishmash, or you might be saying to yourself, do we really need another manga about soccer right now? I will say this story feels nothing like Blue Lock. Blue Lock is a battle royale shonen. And while the main conversation points in Blue Lock are obviously soccer, the revolving cast of characters as Isagi makes his way through Blue Lock and what comes after kind of make it so you don't ever have a full team to connect to like you do with other stories like Aoishi and Haikyuu or Kuroko no Basket or Slam Dunk. On top of this, and it's not that I want to assume this, but I just know how things work, a couple of female characters that are like managers of the soccer team, like Kikyo and Haikyuu, have been introduced, which I believe means that there will be some romance aspects down the line. And as Yukizuki, who apparently through 2 chapters appears to be the 4th most important character in this story, has established herself as a staple of what this story is going to become, then yeah, I don't think it's unlikely that at some point or another she's going to be involved in a romantic plot line with one of the players of the soccer team. So while the world might seem saturated by soccer manga right now, if you're a fan of Windbreaker or more traditional soccer stories like Aoashi or even Haikyuu, I really do think this could be a manga for you. But does that mean I believe that it's going to be able to take down all of the biggest sports anime out there? No, probably not. See, while yes, the artist responsible for making this manga did work on Blue Lock, this manga looks nothing like Blue Lock. Blue Lock looks downright gorgeous, especially in moments where everything's coming together for Isagi or big kicks. And because of that, those moments in those art style translate pretty well to the anime whenever they decide to actually animate it. And while this manga by no means looks bad, its art style is a smidge less aesthetic than its counterparts in Blue Lock or Kuroko no Basket or Slam Dunk. Now, because it is technically a delinquent story, it does do a good job of making the story feel a bit more gritty, but it might be a thing that some people complain about. I personally like it, but you gotta anticipate these kinds of things. But personally, I believe this manga has the highest capability out of any sports manga that I've been keeping up with to replace that Haikyuu-sized hole in our heart. Because while both Haikyuu and Blue Lock are sports anime, I can tell you right now there is very little overlap between the Haikyuu fan base and the Blue Lock fan base. And as fans of Haikyuu tend to be the most vocal fans of people like Bakugo, Haitani is a combination of Bakugo and the orange-haired kid who kind of looked like Ichigo from Blue Lock is gonna pull a lot of people from those existing fan bases over to this story. And I'm telling you right now, like it or not, Kitami and Haitani are going to be shipped. Their dynamic is rather interesting because they're both mean to each other, so it's not a Hinata and Kageyama or an Isagi and Bachira. It's more like a Bakugo and a Todoroki, if Todoroki talked back. I don't know, it's a very interesting vibe, and it's a very interesting and unique story. And it's a story that I do genuinely believe that both the delinquency space space and the sports anime space's need. So I'm really excited to see where this story goes. I have a feeling that I can almost guarantee that in about a year or so, it's going to be announced that this manga is getting an anime. Soccer manga is huge right now, and Blue Lock is kind of limping. This could be the best time for other soccer stories to slide in, grab a little slice of the popularity, and make a name for themselves. Kind of like how Windbreaker slid into the delinquency game immediately after Tokyo Revenger's disappointing ending. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. What did you think from the first 2 chapters of this manga? What are the strong points? What are the weak points? What are you looking forward to in the future? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now the question is, what would the Kitama and Haitani ship name be? Haitama? Kitani? Both of those just sound like names.